Good morning. This is Pamela, and you're listening to Watchmen on the Pod. I am going to read The Root of Communism, which is the Jesuits article that I had posted that a sister in Christ said that she could not read it all. And I said that I was going to read it. So here it is. This is just an insert of The Root of Communism, the Jesuits, and McCarthyism. Understand how President Obama's administration may fit into the Vatican's agenda, it is, I think, necessary to cover briefly the record of Marxism in this country, since our current president is so often accused of having socialist and or communist leanings. Well, the one we got in now is really big time. One of the darkest periods in America's history was the McCarthy era, in which a modern day inquisition was set up to search out communists who were effectively known as the political heretics of the time. What few people today know, however, is that Senator Joseph McCarthy was directly influenced by the Jesuit order to begin his political movement. Hold on 1 minute. That would operate with all the unreasonable zealousness that Rome's historic Inquisition was known for. British author Avro Manhattan described the covert activities that were taking place just a few months before McCarthy began his fearful crusade. I have some of Avro Manhattan's books downstairs. I have not even begun to read them yet. I'll have to pull them out after I get done with the ones that I am reading. Okay, let me continue. In October 1949, Cardinal Spellman was summoned to Rome by the Pope, with whom he had repeated and prolonged private sessions. Although giving rise to sharp speculation, it remained a well-guarded secret. The new Catholic Secretary of the U.S. Navy, Francis Matthews, strangely enough, soon after began unusually active contacts with other prominent American Catholics. Among these, Father Walsh, Jesuit vice president of Georgetown University, Cardinal Spellman, the head of the American Legion, the leaders of the Catholic War veterans, and with Senator McCarthy, arch criminal senator, who, upon the advice of a Catholic priest, was beginning his infamous campaign, which was to half paralyze the U.S. for some years to come. Joe McCarthy himself was educated by the Jesuits at Marquette University. It is said that his Jesuit was a mentor named Edmund A. Walsh. S.J., a man known as the anti-communist, whose influence seems to have woefully infected his famous pupil. By the time McCarthy's career as the American Inquisitor was over, he would be reduced to bitterness, humiliation, and alcoholism. Meet the author, Patrick McNamara. Patrick McNamara is an activist at the Diocese of Brooklyn and teaches history at St. Francis College, St. Joseph Seminary, and the Seminary of the Immaculate Conception. This book is the first biography in 42 years of the priest and educator whom historians have called the most important anti-communist in the country, Edmund A. Walsh. As dean of Georgetown College and founder in 1919 of its school's foreign service, is one of the most influential Catholic figures of the 20th century. Soon after the birth of the Bolshevik state, he directed the Papal Relief Mission in the Soviet Union, starting a lifelong immersion in Soviet and communist affairs. He also established a Jesuit college in Baghdad and served as a consultant to the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal. A pioneer in the new science of geopolitics, another way to say social engineering, Welch became one of Truman's most trusted advisors on Soviet strategy. He wrote 4 books, dozens of articles, and gave thousands of speeches on the moral and political threat of Soviet communism in America. Although he died in 1956, Welch left an indelible imprint on the ideology and practical politics of Cold War Washington, moving easily outside the traditional boundaries of American Catholic life and becoming, in the words of one historian, practically an institution by himself. Few priests, indeed few Catholics, played so large a role in shaping American foreign policy in the 20th century. Interesting side note on Walsh. President Dwight D. Eisenhower sent a letter to Georgetown University when Father Walsh died in 1956, which reads in part: "The death of Father Walsh is a grievous loss to the society in which he served so many years, to the educational and religious life of the United States, and to the free people of the Western world. For 4 decades, he was a vigorous and inspiring champion of freedom for mankind and independence for nations. At every call to duty, his energy of leadership and wisdom of counsel were devoted to the service of the United States." Let's see. And then it said, click here to view his remarks of the dedication of the Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Services of Georgetown University, October 13th, 1958. Now, I'm going to leave the link in the description box so you guys can go and do all these little rabbit trails, which is probably very much necessary. Right now, I do not have the time to click and read the entire, input resources and stuff. So anyway, I will put it in there and it is up to you to begin to follow these. McCarthyism is said to have been born in Washington, D.C. on January 7th, 1950. That night, a meeting took place at the Colony Restaurant, a 4-star establishment in downtown Washington. Attending were 4 men. Georgetown University politics professor Charles Krause, attorney William A. Roberts, Friar Edmund A. Walsh, Jesuit and the head of Georgetown School of Foreign Service, and Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy. Of the 4 men, of course, the most notorious is Senator McCarthy. Perhaps the more important man to history on the night of January 7th was Edmund Walsh, Georgetown Jesuit, unquote. Quote again. On February 9th, 1950, a little more than a month later, McCarthy made his infamous speech in Wheeling, West Virginia, announcing he had a list of the names of 205 communists in the State Department. Many in the media, even the Catholic media, had no doubt that Walsh had been the spur that propelled McCarthy. Catholic magazine The Churchman wrote in 1951 that McCarthy only fires the guns that are made for him by Father Edmund Walsh, S.J. So I said Friar earlier, his father. Glory. The Christian Century referred to Walsh as McCarthy's advisor. In 1953, leftist journalist I.F. Stone claimed that McCarthy has had the guidance of Father Walsh, unquote. It can be said that American Catholics have had some of the strongest voices in opposition to communist influence in this country and around the world. It is likely that most of them are very sincere in their views, but how many of them are aware of Rome's ties to Marxism? Ties that go back to the 19th century, within decades of the first release of the Communist Manifesto. They would rightly ask, why would Rome condemn something on one hand only to support it on another? Jesuit Marxism. To understand the Hegelian character of Jesuitical deception, Hegelian dialect, a very old Jewish principle, we must consider that the doctrines of communism were designed by the Jesuits through what were known as the reductions in Paraguay in the 17th and 18th century, which were a series of communes in which Jesuit priests exercised authority over the natives there. In that environment, the Jesuit order maintained control over a group of South American Guarani Indians who they educated and trained to work on their behalf, generating goods that were later sold in the markets of Europe. From a 1933 book titled Revolutionary Movement by J. Ladder, we read the following quote, the Jesuits had established 20 strong mission centers called reductions, with many thousands of the Garninis enrolled as their members. Jesuits aimed to set up there a completely communistic system in the sense that no individual rights were recognized and there was no private property. Everything belonged to the state and was supposed to be shared in common. But in reality, much greater part of the proceeds of goods sold was always remitted to the Camarilla, Jesuit superiors in Europe, and the Garninis got only the bare necessities of life in return for their toil and sweat. Unquote. The Jesuit leaders provided the necessary food, clothing, and health care the Indians needed, while using them as worker bees to generate income for the order. Just as the Soviet Union would do in the 20th century, the Jesuits maintained strict control over the activities of their subjects. Quote, neither would they allow any Garnini to learn Spanish, nor would they tolerate an intercourse between the Garninis and the peoples of the surrounding Spanish colonies, a prohibition maintained at the sword's point. Unquote. They perfected their system of totalitarian control, all the while telling the world that their oppression over other people was, in fact, utopia, a deluded fantasy maintained by some Catholic historians to this day. Perhaps worst of all is that the Jesuit did not present any form of the gospel, or what might be called the Christian faith, to these poor Indians. Quote, there is no evidence that any effort was ever made by the Jesuits to impart the truths, properly so called, the Christian religion. When the Jesuits were killed, the Garninis having had no moral or religious training to fit them to continue in the Christian faith. In a few years, it became as if no religious teacher had ever lived and worked among them. Unquote. Ideas the Jesuit developed in Paraguay over a period of 158 years were then communicated to Karl Marx in the 19th century. Quote, for 5 years, Karl Marx went to the Jesuit school in Trier, which during the Peruvian period was known as the Friedrich Wilhelm Gymnasium. Along with Karl Marx, other leading communists like Joseph Stalin and Fidel Castro were also trained by the Jesuits. In fact, the former Jesuit general Pedro Arup, 1965 to 1983, once boasted, quote, what makes you think we are not proud of Fidel Castro? Which it is true that the popes are known for condemning communism. This, on their part, seems to be more political manipulation than anything else, since Rome has reportedly supported the principles of communist thought. The Communist Manifesto was first published in 1848, and within less than 50 years, we find the Vatican publishing declarations in agreement with it. In his book, Ecclesiastical Megalomania, author John W. Robbins notes the following, quote, one of the Roman Church state's most influential statements on economic matters is the 1891 encyclical Rerum Novarum on the condition of the working classes. In this encyclical, the Roman Catholic Church state allied herself with the proletariat, which in Marxism is the great final enemy of the capitalist order. Encyclical's Marxism is so blatant that one Roman Catholic writer declared that much of encyclical Rerum Novarum appeared only to repeat in more orthodox language what Marx had said 10 years before. Unquote. Indeed, there are paragraphs, if not pages, in the Communist Manifesto that might have been written by the Pope. Then, incredibly, after about 100 years of various papal diatribes against communism in all forms, Sunday Times of London reported that, quote, Karl Marx, who famously described religion as the opium of the people, has joined Galileo, Charles Darwin, and Oscar Wilde, a growing list of historical figures to have undergone an unlikely reprisal by the Roman Catholic Church, unquote. The article goes on to quote George Sands, a professor at the Vatican Gregorian University, who, with the utmost subtlety, speaks about Marxism in a way that seems carefully designed to undermine capitalism and promote the communist principles that Rome has always aligned herself with. Any study of the papal influence in world governments will prove that capitalism, which is the promotion of free enterprise, is the very antithesis of official Roman Catholic doctrine or dogma. Because of these things, we cannot help but consider the possibility that the real purpose of the McCarthy era was to manipulate the American mentality with Hegelian tactics, intended to take the anti-communist fury to such an extreme that it would become offensive to the American people. McCarthy's methods were so unreasonable that the idea of condemning someone for being a communist was collectively shunned. If we consider the growing influence of communism today, we can only wonder if McCarthyism had been part of the Jesuit greater plan all along. Condition the people to despise anti-communist witch hunting and use their desire for toleration as an open door to usher in a more moderate version of it, i.e., socialism, later on. I totally agree. That's what they did. Such tactics would be impossible to believe, except for the fact that we find Rome on both sides of the issue. Communism and Barack Obama. Much has been said and published about Barack Obama's socialist and communist leanings and associations. Before he was elected president, the website Accuracy in Media published a lengthy article on the subject in which they said, quote, in his books, Obama admits attending socialist conferences, coming into contact with Marxist literature, unquote. He ridiculed the charge of being a hardcore academic Marxist, which was made by his colorful and outspoken 2004 U.S. Senate opponent, Republican Alan Keyes. Quote, however, through Frank Marshall Davis, Obama had an admitted relationship with someone who was publicly identified as a member of the Communist Party USA 9C USA. The record shows that Obama was in Hawaii from 1971 to 1979, where at some point in time he developed a close relationship, almost like a son with Davis, listening to his poetry and getting advice on his career path, unquote. Obama has also been linked to 20th century neo-Marxist Saul Alinsky, considered the father of community organizers, who in his book Rules for Radicals dedicates the work to the ultimate radical and, in our opinion, the real author of communist philosophy. Quote, lest we forget at least an over-the-shoulder acknowledgement to the very first radical from all our legends, mythology, and history, and who is to know where mythology leaves off, history begins, or which is which. The first radical known to man who rebelled against the establishment and did it so effectively that he at least won his own kingdom. Lucifer, unquote. Saul Alinsky. Wow. Obama, Rome, the world economy. Perhaps most significant to the Obama administration was the Pope handing Obama his economic encyclical letter titled Caritas in Veritate, Charity in Truth. The Pope's encyclical, which is the highest form of papal writing, called for reform of the United Nations and financial bodies, giving them the real teeth, needed to tackle economic and social injustice. The source is BBC News. Pope calls for a union with teeth, July 2nd, 2009. These stories emerged, of course, in the midst of the financial crisis that impacted the globe because of the housing market collapse in 2008 and 2009. It was well known that Obama had socialist leanings, and once he was elected president, conditions needed for him to advance a global economy seemed to fall right into place. Henry Kissinger, when commenting on how the newly elected Barack Obama should handle the various crisis situations, said, quote, "The president-elect is coming into office at a moment when there are upheavals in many parts of the world. I think his task will be developed an overall strategy for America in this period when really a new world order can be created. It's a great opportunity. It isn't just a crisis." Unquote. When Obama visited the Vatican the same year, the Pope gave him a copy of his encyclical letter, as if handing him his instructions. Commenting on the Pope's writings, Michael Sean Winters said, quote, "At one point, Benedict sounds like he hired one of Obama's speechwriters for the day." Unquote. Did the Pope hire one of Obama's speechwriters, or did Obama have his views engineered for him by Rome? Wow. All right, brothers and sisters, let me add just a minute here. Just a minute. But who was Barack Obama's vice president? We know him as our president now, Joseph Biden. Now, a little trail to let you know and understand something. There was a man, his name was Vladimir Lenin. He was evil, and he was a socialist over in Russia. There was a man over here in the United States that for some reason was completely enamored by Lenin. Lenin took him underneath his wing. His name was Armand Hammer. No, not the baking soda empire, but this man was extremely rich. He was he was a multi-millionaire. And he was very good friends with Vladimir Lenin. He learned a lot of things, communism, socialism and all that through him. After he died, he came back over here to the United States, primarily stayed over here. I don't believe him and Stalin got along really well, but I can't say, for a fact. After that, Armand Hammer discovered a young man, and this young man's name was Al Gore Sr. He was a senator, and he really liked him. So he took him underneath his wing, okay, teaching him all about socialist, communist, thoughts and stuff like that. Now, after he passed, he was a senator at the time, by the way, Al Gore Sr. was. And then after he had retired the Senate and stuff, he went and he became second in command of Armand Hammer's, vast fortune and all that good stuff. So then later on, after Armand Hammer had passed away, Al Gore Sr., I believe it was during, if I'm not mistaken, it was during the Clinton era. It could have been prior to. There was a young man in the Senate that Al Gore Sr. really thought he has a lot of potential. I really like this guy. So he took this young man underneath his wing. His name was Joseph Biden. That is who is our president today. He is a Jesuit. He is a Roman Catholic Jesuit. And he is a socialist, communist traitor, if you ask me, but that's how I feel. It's just my opinion. But I pray for him anyway. I pray for his salvation. A lot of people, though, are quite fooled by this little portrayal, this little act of him being, I don't know, full of Alzheimer's or dementia or just insane, stupid. He's really seriously not. He's a fantastic actor. And if anyone should get an Oscar, it should be that man because he is not infallible in his mind. I mean, not infallible, but he's not, oh, what's the word I'm looking for, Father? He's not full of dementia. He's really seriously not. He knows exactly what he's doing. He really seriously does. And he is turning this country over to, well, it's already been in Roman hands. A lot of people don't realize that. But you got right now what they're doing is they're transferring the wealth of this country over to other countries. They're opening up, well, the borders have been opened up, but it is bad, brothers and sisters. And I'm just going to end that there before I keep going on and on and on because there's so much I could say, but there's so much that I need not to say at all. Anyway, keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters. Your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And in that, the Word of God, upon the tablets of your heart, so you and I will not sin against God or be deceived. Until next time. Bye-bye.